All right, so we are officially like 3 or 4 days away from getting our first batch of chicks, which means we've been super hard at work getting their brooding house all set up, because this is where they're going to be living for their first 3 weeks of life. So in today's video, I wanted to show you our brooding house setup that enables us to be able to house 500 chicks at one time. The first 3 weeks of a chick's life are critical for progress and development. Because the chicks are so sensitive at such a young age, we have to make sure that everything is functioning as efficiently as possible to enable them to be able to grow as healthily as possible. From our feed storage to our watering system, we'll show you everything in our brooding house that we have to ensure the chicks' first 3 weeks of life is as healthy as possible before they go out to pasture. So the first thing you're probably going to want to know about our brooding house is what is our exact setup and dimensions of the house. So our current brooding house is used inside an old barn that we have on our property. The exact dimensions of the barn itself, I cannot remember off the top of my head, but the sizing of our brooding space is 24 by 18, I believe, 24 by 18 feet. And that specific size, the 24 by 18 feet, enables us to be able to house about 500 birds, giving them about 0.86 square foot per chick. I mean, and they're really tiny at that time, so that's, I personally, from my experience, I think that's plenty of space for them to grow in the 3 weeks of their life. And in this section that we put off for our brooding space, we split everything up into 5 sections. We have 3 sections up front, 1 in the back, and 1 in the far corner. Now on to one of the most important factors, which is heat. When the chicks first arrive in your brooding house, you want to make sure that your temperature for them is roughly about 92 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is determined by how your heating system is set up. So I'm going to show you my exact setup for our heating system right now. So in our brooding house, we have 2 heating systems we implement. The first one, and probably the one that most people think of and know about, is the typical heat lamps. So we get all of our heat lamps from Tractor Supply, just your general local one, and roughly each one, I believe the heat lamp's about $9.99, we'll just say $10. And one individual bulb is about $4.50. So that's $14.50 for one bulb and the heat lamp. And we've got 8 in here so far. So that totals, we said, let's just say 15. So that's a total of about $120 in heat lamps. Now the second, and probably I think it's one of the coolest things we have set up in here, is our big gas-powered heating lamps. And I'm gonna show you that in just a second. So this right here, right above me, is our gas-powered heat lamp, and this thing generates a lot of heat. One of the coolest things about this heat lamp is we are able to control the temperature gauge when it should come on and stay on and when it should come off. So typically with the heat lamps and this big heater, and we have 2 of those in here, one over there and one just above me, covers pretty much all of our brooding sections, is we typically leave it on about 70-75 degrees with the heat lamps on. So that kind of gives a nice temperature of 92 degrees that you want to have in that first week of life when the chicks are in your brooding house. Now something like this, and that's not with installation, is probably going to range from about $300 to $500 to put in, and that's just the cost of this piece of equipment here. But I would say, you know, it's a lot of money up front, but it will save you a lot of money when it comes to like survival of chicks, because you're going to be able to maintain that perfect heat temperature for all of your chicks when they first arrive in your brooding house. The next thing that is extremely important to think about is where on earth are you going to store all this feed. So with having about 500 birds, we're probably going to go through 2,000 pounds of starter feed over that 3 weeks. And for those who raise birds, know that, or just even if you don't raise birds, 2,000 pounds is a lot of food that's going to be sitting inside a house. And with all that food sitting here, if it's not protected, it's going to attract a lot of rodents. So to prevent the rodents from having a big old party, we put all of our feed in these salvageable totes. So when I say salvageable, these are totes that we bought from a website, which I will link in the description below. And what this one is an old ice cream tote that used to hold milk, and this one is an old dry ice tote that used to hold dry ice. And these 2 totes typically ran about $200 to $300 a piece, but I would highly recommend getting them because they are thick plastic, and rodents are not going to be busting through these totes. We had a couple rodents try and get through the bottom here, but it's so thick that nothing is gonna get through and get into the feed. And how we access the feed, it's really easy. All you have to do is just pick up the lid, slide it back, and then you can get access to all of their delicious feed. And while I'm talking about feed, I may as well show you how we set up our feeding system in our brooding house. So the feeders we use, we always make sure that we buy feeders that can be hung. So this right here is called Flock Party poultry feeder. So this looks like this, and you just pour the feed in the top and it can be hung up here. And the reason why we want everything to be hung is because the chicks' most efficient way to eat, and the way they're the happiest, is when the feed level is about shoulder height. So if we had feeders that were just, you know, flat on the ground like we did when we first started, the chicks are constantly having to bend over and eat and lift their head up to swallow, and it's just more work for them to do, and it's just not as efficient. But yeah, I really like this style because you can see what the level is, so you know that you can make sure that they never run out of feed, and you can just get a scooper and just pour the feed right on top. Just makes life really easy for you. So you can find these feeders anywhere online or on your local Tractor Supply. I got these from our local Tractor Supply the other day actually, and I believe they ran about $9 a piece. I'm probably lying about that, but I'm pretty sure it was about $9 a piece. And the way we hang everything is by chain and by an S-hook. So let me show you that real fast. The S-hook is like that, just a little piece of metal that's shaped like an S. And what we do is we can just hook it up onto the chain and hang it at any level we'd like. So that way, as the chicks get older, we can raise the level up each week to suit their appropriate height, where their shoulders should be. So that's a really efficient factor, so that way we're not messing with string, and it just makes life a lot easier and more efficient for us. The next thing I'm going to talk about is our watering system. So many of you who raise small flocks probably use waterers like this, but as you start to grow and get more and more chicks in your brooding house, it's going to be super inefficient and they're going to run out of water very quickly. Trust me, I've learned the hard way. So the watering system we use is a gravity waterer that is called Poisson gravity waterer, which we get from, that I'll have to check with you, check back with you. I'll put the link in the description when I remember. But yeah, it's a gravity waterer, so it has a ballast underneath it, and it will determine when it should fill. So it's connected to a bucket above, and the water trickles down in from this line right here and goes into the base right here. And as the water fills up, it will lean down and it will stop the water flow. And then when the chicks drink more, it will lift up and it will tell the waterer to start refilling. And how we control the height, again, it's the same system as our feeder. It's all on a chain and an S-hook. So as the chicks get older, we can raise it for the appropriate drinking height. So like for example, as they get to their last week, we'll probably want to lift it up like that, so that way they can reach up and drink it at shoulder height. So that again just makes things so much more efficient for us when caring for the birds, and it keeps them living a much healthier life. So the price of these drinkers aren't really cheap. They run about $65, and that's not with shipping each. We have 4 of them in here, but that enables us to be able to maintain water for 100 chicks at a time. So really, I mean, for labor, it's definitely worth that cost. It's just, you'll just have to, it's a lot more upfront cost than you'll want, but labor wise, saving time and effort and energy, totally worth it. All right, and the final thing I want to talk about is bedding. There are so many options out there for you to use as bedding. You've got, you know, your typical pine shavings, you've got thick or fine cut shavings, you've got pit moss, you've got hemp seed, yeah, you've got all kinds of stuff that you can use. So I haven't used all of them, but I'll just give you my experience on the ones I have used so far. So the ones that you currently see behind me are the traditional premium pine shavings. We never like to use the fine cut, we always use the flake, and we got this from, again, Tractor Supply. Tractor Supply is our number one. We're Tractor Supply's biggest fan. But yeah, we typically use about 3 bags in each section, and that roughly does about 2 inches thick for the birds, which is maybe a little more than you need, but usually about 1.25 inches is good for chicks. But yeah, the pine shavings, the flakes have been our favorite so far. We have used the fine shaving, and it just gets so clumpy and nasty really quickly. So I would just recommend, if you're gonna do shavings, stick with the flake. So I think right now the flakes currently run about $7.50, I think, and that's with taxes. So we use 12 for 4 pens, so we'll end up using 15 for all 5 pens. So for 15 bags, that's about $150. But we are going to be switching over to pit moss, which is pretty much decomposed paper. And we talked to this company at a conference we went to in January, and it sounded like a really cool design and material to use. And the nice thing is you can reuse it throughout the season. So for the pine flakes, once the birds are done, one batch is done, you have to scoop it all out and then throw it in your compost pile, whatever you need to do with it, and then put new fresh flakes on. Whereas with the pit moss, you're able to kind of reuse it and just fluff it up and then refresh a bit on top, and it makes it nice and fresh again. So we're going to be getting that probably for our second batch of the year. So I'm excited to see how that works. And of course, I'll let all of you know my personal opinion and experience with it. But for now, I can only give you my opinion on the flakes. So that is about everything we have in our brooding house that we use and utilize to try and make our chicks' life as healthy as possible before they go out to pasture. Of course, every farm is going to be different. Things that we do, you might be looking at and going, what the hell's wrong with you? Why would you do it like that? So if you do have fresh ideas for us, I'm all ears. I'd love to know. I'm always looking to get better. This is just for you who are wanting to grow to more batches, more birds at a time. This is the most efficient way we've found at a fairly decent price. But this style may not work for your setup. We have a nice barn that we're able to kind of get everything set up in, whereas you might have to just square off a section in somewhere on your property, or bring in a shipping container to have brood chicks. I'm not sure, and that our style that we have might just not be appropriate for you. So the big question, what is the total cost for this brooding setup? Now, I'm not factoring in the building itself or big structures, but I'm also like the general supplies that we have. So I think it totals to around just over $1,700 for our whole setup with the supplies. Like I said, it's give or take, it's not 100% accurate, but I am factoring in the totes and the feeders and the bedding and the waterers and the heaters. So obviously it's not per batch, it's going to be $1,700, kind of the overall setup for the whole season. So $1,700 for however many batches you want. So I hope that was useful and informative for all of you. Of course, the birds are going to be arriving about Wednesday or Thursday this week, so we're super pumped about that. And obviously we'll film getting them and setting them up, and take you through our whole journey through this road to 3,400 birds. But for now, we just really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe this video, and we'll see you on the next episode.